Hey everyone, and welcome back to Swift Guitar Lessons for another by request song tutorial. In today's lesson, I'll be breaking down Bob Dylan's 1964 protest song, The Times They Are A-Changin. I'm going to take you through the chord progressions, but also some of the strumming tricks that you can use in 3/4 time. I got all the tabs available for you as usual at patreon.com/swiftlessons, where you can find a ton of extra resources. Now, let's get started with your lesson. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming. You'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changin'. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still at spin, and there's no telling who it is naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changin'. Senators and congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for it's he who gets hurt will be he who is stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changin'. Mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changin'. The line is drawn, the curse is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, and the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, the first one now will later be last, for the times they are a-changin'.
Okay, close look at the fretboard and also my strum in hand, getting started with my take on The Times They Are A-Changin'. Because I want this lesson to be as beginner friendly as possible, we're going to go through each of the chords that we'll be needing for this tune in alphabetical order. Getting started with A minor. Okay, use the chord diagrams on the screen to guide you along. We'll also be needing C major. Another variety of that C chord is C9. A D major chord, a D/A, just strumming from the A string instead of the D string. Alright, a little bit lower. An E minor chord, a G major, okay, played Busker style. And we'll also need a G/B, which is a G chord without the middle finger, strumming from the A string down. Okay, so A minor, C, C9, D, D/A, E minor, G major, and G/B. for all the chords in The Times They Are A-Changin. Okay, fantastic. We have those chords down. For the beginners out there, really take the time to get to know those chords. If you're passionate about learning the song, practice each one in repetition, then practice transitioning between the chords themselves. Now we're going to jump into the verse. The one thing I want you all to know is that each of the verses can be played basically the same exact way, identically. The only thing that changes is the number of strums on each of the last chords of a given stanza. In addition to that, at the end of each of these verses, he throws together a different combination of the progressions that you find inside the verse. This seems to be played completely at random, and if you watch Bob Dylan's live performances of the song, he plays it differently every single time. Okay, now I'm going to take you through verse number 1, and we're going to go line by line, following along with the chord sheet at patreon.com/swiftlessons. This is going to begin with a G major chord, the 1 chord. Come gather round. Then we go to the minor 6 chord, E minor. Of course, I'm referencing the major scale in the key of G when I say these numbers. Then we go to the 4 chord, C. And back to the 1 chord. So progression number 1 is a 1, 6, 4, 1, using that Busker's G. All right, let's give it a shot. Just strumming through the chords. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam. All right, at this point I'm going to show you how to strum it in a very basic way. Just a standard 3/4 strumming pattern with separated bass and treble. All right, so just hit the root and then strum on the high strings. Root, strum, transition, root, strum, the C chord, root, strum, and back to the G chord, root, strum, root, strum. There's actually 2 measures in 3/4 time on that final G chord. All right, and that is consistent throughout the song. All right, line number 2. And admit that the waters around you have same exact progression, except this one's going to go to the D chord, groan, and that's just going to be for 1 measure, which might throw you off at first. Okay, so far we have the G chord. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam. 2 of these. Then the G chord repeats for line number 2. And admit that the waters around you have D chord, groan, and accept it that soon. This is line number 3. You'll be drenched to the bone. Okay, so line number 3 is exactly like line number 1. The only thing is, on the first verse, he plays that final G chord for 3 measures. He does not do that for the rest of the song, though. Again, this is Bob Dylan, so it's a little bit loose. Okay, so line number 3 again, and accept it that E minor soon. You'll be drenched to the G chord for 3, though I want to tell you now, if you want to just do 2 for all the verses, you can do that. Bone, 2, 3. If you're now on to line number 4, time to you is worth saving. So that was just a G chord to the minor 2 chord, A minor, and then to a D chord for 2 measures in 3/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're going to get into a section. This is going to be line number 5. And this is the section that I call the Buskers section because we're going to be using Buskers shapes, specifically that C9 chord or C add 9 chord. Okay, so this part's going to sound like this. So you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. All right, beautiful section there. Walking down. A D major chord, strike the D string, strum. Then go to that C, add 9. All right, root, strum off of the A string. All right, then we're going to go to a G/B. All right, again hitting that A string and then strumming through the chords twice. And then finally, a D chord with an A in the bass. Alright, this is a very common technique in folk music, kind of creating those walk downs. So the bass line's going just like that. Alright, so then we put it all together. We have, so you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. Back to a regular D major chord. Remember to take that pinky off. Okay, now moving on to the final line for the times they are a-changin'. Goes like this. For the time they are a-changin'. That's the simple version of it. I'm going to give you two versions that you can use. Actually, three versions that you can use. So that was just very simple. The G chord, the one chord, root, strum, strum. Drop these top fingers down to the A and D strings. Root, strum, strum. Then to the D chord, root, strum, strum. And back to the G chord. Alright, now what I like to do is a walk up from the a walk up to the C add 9. So root, strum, strum on the G. Now check this out. Second fret A, third fret A, strum through. Then I'll go to the D chord and back to the G. You put all that together and it sounds like this. Now I might also hammer on that little walk up there. Which I really prefer. So that was root, strum, strum, hammer, strum, strum, D chord, root, strum, strum, and back to the G chord. Of course, if you're a beginner, you're just going to do it very, very straightforward. Root, strum, strum, root, strum, strum, root, strum, strum, root, strum, strum. Alright, he follows that up with the first chord progression with some harmonica over top. So we have G, E minor, C, G, 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 to get us into verse number 2. Okay, great, we have those chords down, verse number 1 is all figured out, and we have that great strumming pattern in 3/4 time. Real quick, I want to give you a variation to that strumming pattern that you can use whenever you want to build up the energy a little bit. Sounds like this. Alright, so very, very small difference there. We're going to go root, down, up, root, down, up, 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, and. The trick here is hitting the root that is appropriate to each of the chords. So if it was a G chord, that's rooted off of the low E string. If it was like a C chord or a C add 9, that is rooted off of the A string. And if it was some type of D chord, that would be rooted off of the D string. The strums that precede the root are always underneath. You don't want to include the root in the strum, otherwise it muddies up the bass line. Okay, now we're moving into verse number 2. This one is almost identical to verse number 1 with just a couple of small little changes, and again, that last progression with the harmonica being played over top of it is going to be different. So this begins the same exact way on the one chord. Come writers and critics, prophesize with your pen. Moving to the next line, keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. Right to the G chord, and don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. So there on line number 3 of verse 2, he only does 2 measures of that G chord, then goes on to the next line. And there's no telling who that it's naming. Your Busker section, for the loser now will be later to win. And then finally wrapping it up, for the times, let's do our hammer on, they are a-changin'. Alright, a measure of the G chord, then we get into the harmonica. It's going to be progression number 1, followed by your Busker's progression. Again, I want you all to remember, if you want to make all of these tail end harmonica sections exactly the same, you can be my guest. It won't make too much of a difference. But in Dylan's version, he goes G, to the 6th chord E minor, 4 chord C, back to the 1, then he walks down through the Busker's chords. And he holds out this D/A a long time. I like to do it 4 times, then get into verse number 3. Okay, so the rest of the verses are played exactly the same way as verse number 2. It's only in verse number 1 that he takes that G chord and extends it out. It was probably by accident, to be honest with you. So the rest of the verses are going to be the same. We're going to move on to verse number 3 and just talk about the tail end harmonica section there. That's the only thing that changes. Okay, so on verse number 3, we're going to take that Times They Are A-Changin, for the times they are a-changin, and just go right to the Busker section. You can hold out that D/A. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land. Now you're in verse number 4. That's also going to be the same, but again, it's going to have a different end-in progression. Okay, so the end-in part for verse number 4 is very much extended. This is going to be a full harmonica solo. It's going to start off with the first progression, G, E minor, C, G. Then we're going to have the Busker's progression. Alright, 2 rounds of that D/A, but then he's going to throw in the hook progression, the Times They Are A-Changin, the exact same chords that we play over that lyric. So that's going to be the G, the C9 chord, C+9, the D chord, and then the G major chord. And again, you can hold out that last chord for as long as you like to get you into the next verse, verse number 5. Okay, moving into your 5th and final verse. It's played exactly the same way. The line is drawn, the curse is cast. The slow one now will later be D chord, and the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading. Alright, then the D chord comes in, your Busker section. For the first one now will later be last. And wrap it up with, for the times they are a-changin. Alright, for this one, I like to end it by repeating that hook section chord progression. So G, C add 9, D to G. And preferably, I like to slow down, do a retardando, so that way it comes to a very definitive close. That's it, everybody. You've picked up some great chord progressions, some techniques that every beginner should learn, and a fantastic protest song that actually is just as applicable today, I think, as it was back in 1964. So practice these changes nice and slow for you beginners out there. You have to be patient and also not afraid to add a little bit of yourself to this song, okay? This is not the type of song that you play the exact same way every single time. Alright everyone, thanks so much for checking out this lesson on Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much to my supporters at patreon.com/swiftlessons. I hope you're enjoying the extra resources. I got many more videos coming up, so keep checking back. Please subscribe, please share. This is Rob at Swift Guitar Lessons in Philadelphia, saying happy picking.